Hello, welcome to Nintendo Deep Dive. This is Carl, and we are moving on into part 2 of our Wii U games show and tell. So before we continue on with the games I was showing, for those of you who are jumping into part 2 of this, please see part 1 if you're keen. Anywho, before we continue on showing off some of the games, or the rest of the games, this being them, just want to go over some of the controllers that the Wii U used. Now, as you can see from here, this is it's a Wii Remote Plus with the Motion Plus inside. I don't think older Wii remotes were compatible with Wii U games. They were compatible with Wii games, of course. Well, actually, that's not true. Older Wii remotes were compatible, depending on how you were using them. But for motion control stuff, the Wii U is taking more standardized Wii Motion Plus controllers, and I'm very chuffed about that because I always liked using this controller. I thought it was very ergonomic, with the left-hand one being very comfortable in its shape, and the right-handed Wii remote being just nice and hefty. And if you wanted to be a rebel, I suppose you could switch them around, which I think one of the games actually has you do that, a Wii game. But I like using the Wii remote, especially on the Wii U, because it seemed like the fidelity of the gesture-based controls was actually higher. And it was the same technology, so I think it was a matter of programming. And of course there's the Wii remote, but if you just wanted to play with a lighter controller that had standard controls, you had the Wii U Pro controller. Rechargeable via cord, and when fully charged up, it had 60 to 80 hours of battery life. I don't think I've charged this more than half a dozen times, but then again, I don't use it too often. But it is a very nice controller. The sticks being above the buttons may not be perfect in shooters. Not that I've necessarily had a problem with it. Well, I don't know why it would be a problem, actually. I suppose maybe it's more comfortable moving the camera from here than here. Though maybe there's more finesse you can do out here than in here, though I don't even think that makes sense. Though, by having the sticks up here, you basically have a Super Nintendo controller right here with the D-pad and the buttons being aligned. So if you're playing Super Nintendo games, that's actually very nice, with really nice shoulder buttons, and I wouldn't say these are great triggers. I would say the Xbox One controller had the best triggers in this 8th generation, but still very nice. And super reliable controller. And I just wanted to touch on those because I think it's important to state that the Wii U, as far as controller option goes, is Nintendo maybe at its best. You can even use GameCube controllers for Smash Brothers, which I will say I like more than the Pro controller, though I don't even know if I like them more than this tablet here. This is just very comfortable for me, and I like the heft of it. Anyway, we were still in 2013 of our, as far as software goes. We stopped off on Call of Duty Ghosts, and we will continue on with Super Mario 3D World. Initially, when it was showed off at E3, this game was actually quite maligned in previews. But now, I don't know, it's as well regarded as any other Mario game. People, when it was in its prime during the Wii U days, people did bemoan the fact that Mario had become very invested in the course clear design as far as its structure and its objectives, as opposed to more open level design like Super Mario 64 and Sunshine. And so I think this game, as good as it was, people maybe didn't appreciate it until Mario Odyssey came out, because then they got their fix as far as that goes. Me personally, and I think just rationally, this is a significantly better game than Super Mario Odyssey, and it's among the best of Mario games. The amount of assets and ideas in this game is staggering. The co-op play it's simple and yet adds a whole lot without adding too much frustration. You still have some of that friction between the players like you do in New Super Mario Brothers, but because you're moving in a more 3D space, it you definitely have the ability to stay out of each other's way and then to cooperate as needed. This game is mostly about clearing courses, but the exploration aspects of it, where you're finding the 3 stars and the stamp in each level, they're actually really, really strong. And the game's graphics are beautiful. The final boss is great. And the final world, which includes the Champions Road. I don't think anybody's going to say that the Perfect Run or the Odyssey final level or even 3D Land's final level matches the Champions Road. Champions Road is what makes this game go from great to superb. It's a superb Mario game. It takes a little while to get going, up until the second last level of the second world, but then it gains traction. So, Super Mario 3D World, it wasn't appreciated in its time, and I think a lot of that goes for this library. Pikmin 3 wasn't appreciated. Super Mario 3D World wasn't appreciated. And there's a reason for that I'll get into down the line, but that really was an unfortunate thing about this console. And anyway, I'll get more into it later. I have this down as being something that came after Super Mario 3D Land, and perhaps it did come after, but maybe it was just the first one that came after, and then the second one came out in early 2014. But I think, I don't know. I think maybe both of these games were out by late 2013, and this came out in December, and 3D World came out in November. So this game, super smart idea. You take the NES games of old, which can be quite rough around the edges. And rather than forcing new players to play through them in extended fashion, you instead create bite-sized challenges and with bite-sized short-form objectives within the confines of each of these games. And then it both teaches the player how to play these games, or it does teach them how to play these games, and then you can purchase them on the eShop, which they do show. How would I put it? They do have like an eShop logo in the game, so you can buy these games after you played them. So it's kind of advertising them. But beyond that, the big thing, it being called NES Remix, it then remixes the challenges. One of them being, I think, this link is going up not 35 millimeters or 35 meters or 75 meters, but the first Donkey Kong level. And he can't jump. So he has to figure out how to, or you rather, have to figure out how to beat that level without jumping, like you would with Mario. And so there's all these little fancy remix levels that mix items. One of them has Kirby eating blocks in a Mario level, for instance. And I guess it takes a while to get into this game, but it's such a fun, cool idea. And by themselves, I don't know if they constitute a full release, but together, they're definitely like a good AA package. And, worth talking about. And a really fun, off-the-wall idea. So after NES Remix came out, we got, in February of 2014, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze. And this game is nothing short of magnificent. I'm trying to figure out why I'm casting a shadow here. There we go. Oh well. And it was magnificent, and it wasn't given its due in its day. When it came out on Switch, all of a sudden, the reviews were much higher, and it was called the best 2D platformer in a long time. But the problem with the Wii U, and the problem with people's perception of it, was every game had to be the game that would save the Wii U. And so when a game came out that was good, it would be like, oh, but is it going to save the Wii U? And, well, guess what? It wouldn't. And so people who either maybe even own the system or maybe were watching the system, hoping to own it, they would put it off because they just wanted that killer app. And they kind of put that killer app on a pedestal, and they didn't give these games that were more iterative and, let's say, more what you would expect a chance. But this is a killer app game. Once you play it, it's not a killer app in that it will draw you in, but it's remarkable. The level design is vibrant, complex, and yet, in addition to being complex, it's elegant. The music is a triumph. The difficulty is, it's very present. It's a very difficult game, but it's a game that by the time you finish a level, you basically perfected it. You're perfect at it. And so, this is a remarkable platformer. And it, even reviewers, they just, because I guess they were reading the interest of their audience, they kind of just called it a bunt when it came out, which is kind of insane to me, and I don't really understand that kind of logic. I just need to see if these are... Oh yeah, they're fine where they are. So, I'm not going to talk about Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, but yeah, we were definitely due for another one of those. But then again, you really can't beat perfection. So, before I show this next one, which you can already see, excuse me, it's Mario Kart 8. It seems that people, I don't know, they're more interested in being excited than they are, more interested in being excited about a game pre-release than they are about the final product, which seems incredibly silly. And so, really, with a game console, you can almost release a couple killer apps and then just coast with some middling to okay titles, and people will be ecstatic about it because you got them all wound up and they're just riding on that high. I'm not that kind of person. I really like to analyze things past that point, so excitement kind of is normalized, and like I figured it was that way for everybody, but I don't know. But this game, I'm speaking of killer apps, this game came out and it actually put the Wii U on the charts. And all of a sudden, everybody was excited about the Wii U for a couple months for a game that is very, very beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but it's really, in all senses, a very standard Mario Kart. I appreciate all the pomp and circumstance of it, and this is the second best Mario Kart and the best standard Mario Kart, but I don't know, like it lit up the charts and then it got people excited, or I guess it got people excited first and then it lit up the charts. I don't know. That makes more sense, but it's weird that people, I don't know, didn't feel that way about some of these other games. But anyway, this one really caught on. Excuse my little rant about the Wii U not getting its due, but this game would go on to sell 8 million copies, or 8.1 million copies, on a system that only sold 13 million. So it did pretty well. I would say my favorite thing about this game is that if you're in first, aside from one blue shell or maybe two blue shells, worst case scenario, you are going to be left alone. If you're in fourth or lower, you're in the meat grinder. But first, second, and third, you're kind of just competing with each other. And if you're in first and you get quite ahead, then first and second are going to have a hard go at it. As you can see here, you have optional motion steering, which I never liked on the Wii U or the Wii remote. It just seemed like you turned to, or how do I put it? On the Mario Kart Wii, they wanted you to turn the thing too much. And so when you were going back to your default position with it, it actually wouldn't read your return to the default. And then you'd almost kind of just come out of a turn and you'd just be flying straight into a wall. Like your turn, it's hard to explain, but you just had a hard time returning to your default position. With the Wii Remote, which has more of a steering wheel-like size, you could just kind of turn a lot with very small motions too, as well. And I played like the first 150 hours of this with motion steering, and I really enjoyed it. And the game would then go on to add 16 DLC tracks that were to the quality of the 32 base tracks, and maybe even surpassing it. And it added 200cc, which was just a tossed off idea. And yet, it really made the game come to life again for me. So a very good Mario Kart, and it actually gave the system a life for a summer in 2014, though it came out, I think, in May. Though there was another game that I wanted to include, which came out in April, and that is a little far down. This game done by Ubisoft, by a small team, but it's still quite AAA. I haven't played it, but people really like it. It's called Child of Light, which has this very storybook aesthetic and is purportedly very good. If I can find it. There it is. Not much to say about it. It's an RPG with a storybook aesthetic that's very beautiful and was considered very good. And I thought it was a title that should be acknowledged. And that came out before Mario Kart. Now, after Mario Kart 8, going back to the Wii U gamepad, and I may have to speed this along. We got a sequel to Pushmo, which was on the 3DS, in the form of Pushmo World. And Pushmo World was just kind of a remake with lots of additions, and it's enough of a new game to be considered its own game, and it was kind of the definitive puzzle game on Nintendo systems for this generation. There's also Crash-Mo and Stretch-Mo, and I can't speak to their quality, but Pushmo was a really great idea, and it's not quite AAA, but you really can't make a puzzle game too AAA, so yeah, there's Pushmo. And I'm going to rearrange some of these titles. All right. So after Mario Kart 8 and after Pushmo World coming out in June 19th of 2014, we got Shovel Knight, which was an exclusive to the 3DS and the Wii U, though it was also out on PC, but for the other consoles it wasn't out. For a full year, this was an exclusive for Nintendo systems outside of PC. And this game, I'm not always in love with indie games. I find them to be very narrow in their scope. But Shovel Knight, it just felt like a complete package game. It felt like a grand AAA NES game, though it would control better and was friendlier. Well, I don't want to say it would control better, but heavily influenced by Super Mario Bros. 3, DuckTales especially, and even Adventure of Link and Mega Man. Shovel Knight it has a AAA feel to it. It's a whole package kind of game, and it's a great title. It's one of the best indies ever made. And when it came out, they made promises that they have continued to hold up, and I think they're done with those promises now, but they essentially, for early adopters, they were getting additional campaigns, some of which were new, others which were very, very new, the first one, Plague Knight, being more of a remix, but then, Plague Knight, but then Spectre Knight being a whole new campaign, and then King Knight being a new campaign, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just a lot of add-on content. And it looks like an NES game, but it feels AAA. And it doesn't feel like a a narrow callback. It's kind of it's a game that's its inspirations are a little more vague than some other indie games, I guess, if that makes sense. So that's Shovel Knight. Super great time. And apparently I showed off Art of Balance early as a launch title, but Art of Balance actually came out October 9th, 2014, developed by Shinen. Or Shinen? I don't know. So after Art of Balance, which came out on October, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. After Art of Balance, we got Hyrule Warriors. Hyrule Warriors is a Musou game with a coat of paint, a Zelda coat of paint. I had a lot of fun with it when it came out, not expecting to. I'm not the biggest fan of Musou games, and over the years they had a lot of DLC characters from which you could derive a lot of enjoyment, I suppose. But I played it for about 50 hours, and then by then the repetition was pretty set in. I think people like this game a lot more than I do, though. But it came out as a kind of a desperate measure and stopgap in September 26th of 2014, which means that July and August really didn't have any games for the Wii U, not really. But in October, we got Bayonetta 2. And some of these would actually come out with the first Bayonetta attached. But with Bayonetta 2, to the chagrin of a few people, was developed by, or developed as an exclusive for the Nintendo Switch, or Nintendo Wii U, pardon me, by Platinum once again. And this is, I think, considered the best of the Bayonetta series. Maybe appreciation for 3 will grow, but people really like this one. And it's got lots of panache and pomp and circumstance and production value and lots of big set piece fights and really crazy enemy design and combat animations. I haven't really played it myself, but it's a character action game by Platinum. So, I don't know. Really can't go wrong. And it was critically acclaimed when it came out. And that's all I'll say about it. And, it was definitely a much needed exclusive in the Wii U's library, as there was dwindling support among third parties at this point. Then after Bayonetta, just a full month after, in November of 2014, we got Smash Brothers for Wii U. Not the most exciting title name, but this game, which has a very nice back panel, this box art here, not my favorite box art, but the back panel's nice, and inside, it's just an empty case. I own it digitally, but I wanted a visual, or a physical representation, pardon me. This game, the biggest and best thing about it is the character roster. They just made it significantly larger and with really smart additions. Smart additions to the Pokemon lineup, smart additions to the Mario lineup, and none for the Metroid lineup. None for the Zelda lineup either, really. But some really good Fire Emblem characters, and they added Palutena from Kid Icarus Uprising. She's not great, but, well, I mean, she's pretty cool. I'm not sure she's majorly gaming ready, I guess. And Little Mac was a great addition, though his aerials are terrible, of course, which is funny. And yeah, Pac-Man and Mega Man were, they're not Nintendo, but they're from that time when everything on a Nintendo system was considered Nintendo. So smart additions, single player content's not perfect on this, but I still like the feel of this more than Ultimate by a fair degree. And between this and 3DS, there was a lot of great Smash content. So, what more can I say about it? And there's some good DLC too, including Bayonetta coming to that game much later. So after Super Smash Brothers, we got Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, which Captain Toad Treasure Tracker was an idea started in Super Mario 3D World. And apparently they had enough fun with that idea that they spun it off into its own game. And I don't want to say this game is marvelous. It's sort of a smaller bite-sized game, came out for $40, but had they charged $60 for it, I don't know if I would have cared, because it's actually a fantastic package. These smaller worlds mean that well, how do I put it? I'm just going to hide those. The smaller worlds mean that the graphics for each one is just super good texture work and lighting. It's a beautiful game, and it's essentially a puzzle game with some light platforming elements, and each level is this little diorama that you are scurrying around to get every diamond and every star on, and it's just phenomenal and creative. Like it's like an 8 out of 10 kind of game, and just a winner, even though it's kind of just a little spin-off. And they haven't done a sequel, which is, I don't know, I'm not necessarily concerned about, though it's an idea that you could put some more juice into. And that was it for 2014. And then 2015 was interesting because it was a lighter year, and yet I enjoyed everything that came out in that lighter year, even though there wasn't much. Really only 8 titles worth mentioning. I'm going to put these up here. Suppose you can't see all of that, but we're actually gonna, well, we can keep them there. I think the camera's grabbing onto their logos a bit much. So in 2015, we got Splatoon, but before we got Splatoon, we actually got a few games I want to talk about. Let's talk about a few games that they were indie games, and yet they were they were exclusives, and 2, they used the features of the Wii U with such effectiveness that they basically should be considered as must-have titles. The first one being, if I'm correct here, Affordable Space Adventures. Actually, no, the first one being, before we get into those indies, the first game to come out for the Wii U was Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, which it's definitely an okay game. It's not terrible, though it's definitely funner in multiplayer, as you have people who are controlling Waddle Dees, playing up on the big TV where all the beautiful graphics are, while the gamepad player is looking down at the screen, drawing lines with the stylus. It's a sequel essentially to Canvas Curse, so you're doing a lot of stylus control, which is fun, but it's hard to look at the TV where the graphics are best, as this is only a 480p screen, and it's a little faded. The color saturation's a little off, but it's still nice looking, but it's kind of an issue with the design of this game. Otherwise, it's a 6-hour-long Kirby game that looks beautiful, and its gameplay is fun, if not simple. But after Kirby came out, and Kirby came out in, let me see here, came out in February of 2015. In April of 2015, we got Affordable Space Adventures. And this is a marvelous use of the Wii U technology. And I'm not too concerned about the fact that only a few games ended up doing that, as, well, the games that did do it, it was really, really great. In other games, there's just these little examples that are scattered about in side modes and mini games that are also super enjoyable, if a little finite and limited. And I don't know, I think that's, does it justify the Wii U gamepad idea? I don't know. I just think it's a comfortable controller, and so even when the idea isn't being justified, as is the case in this game right here, where this is just black, I'm fine with that. But this game, yeah, this was a one game where that idea was just really, the idea of the Wii U gamepad, or the idea they present in this game, rather, excuse me, couldn't be done without this interface. So this game, it's a side-scroller where you're controlling a rickety little ship, and you can control it all by yourself, but that wouldn't be the point of the game. You need to be playing this at least 2-player. And one person controls the engine down here, and the other controls the flight of the ship. And you have to coordinate between the two of you, as you have different systems in play. As the, let's call it the engineer, you have an electric engine, a diesel engine, a pulse move that can shoot you short distances to get you out of danger, and there's lots of danger in the game, but depending on what the problem is, you may need to use different things or turn down different things. You may need to turn down the electric engine, as I think well, no, not the electric engine. You may need to turn down the diesel engine, or change to the electric engine, because the diesel engine is too loud for things that will kill you if you enter their sound cone, or you may need to switch. It's like, I don't know how to put it other than you may need to turn off your stabilizers to move at a certain speed, give more power to your engines to get through an obstacle, but that makes your ship weirdly stable, weirdly unstable. And so the pilot has to deal with all of these considerations while you're just doing this. And sometimes, like, it will be a case where the engineer, who's worried about all these things, just powers the ship down so low that it just drops out of the sky, and the pilot is just blindsided. And there's even 3 players where a third person can control the light, but I don't know. I don't know if that works. Really, it's just cooperative, and it's something that only can happen on the system. And it's a game that basically you can't really do on anything but the Wii U. So this is also sunken treasure on a sunken ship, pretty much. Oh. So that's Affordable Space Adventures. And we're just going to set everything down, and I actually have to get up, so there will be just a little quick cut in this video, but we'll continue on like there wasn't. Okay. Okay, I just had to step away for a second there. Well, actually about a full day. But we'll just continue on from where we left off. So, after Affordable Space Adventures was out in April, in May, the tail end of May, we got Splatoon. In my opinion, of the 3 Splatoon games, the first one is still the best. And I find a lot of its success was very accidental in the best kind of way. The game, when they released it, it still was obviously not finished. And so they played it off like it was a games as a service game. But unlike other games as a service games, it's hard to say that. Splatoon, it rolled out its new content really quickly, and by August of 2015, it was basically a full game. Though I believe they put out some new maps into 2016 maybe, and also some Splatfests in that time as well. Either way, this is Nintendo's first wholly new IP in quite a while, since the Wii series anyway. And if you don't really want to count that as like an intellectual property, then you could say since Pikmin maybe. And it was a first in a number of ways for them. It was their first shooter, essentially, though it wasn't a first-person shooter, it was a third-person shooter. The first competitive, and when I say first shooter, I mean first competitive online shooter. It was also one of the first games to really popularize gyro controls within that genre, which worked really well. I really liked the controls in this game, and I'll talk about them in a moment. But Splatoon was marvelous when it came out. It only came out with 5 stages, but by the first weekend of its launch, they had a 6th stage out. That stage being Port Mackerel, which was one of the best stages they had in the game. And I think don't know when, maybe in June, they had another ranked mode out called Tower Control, which is my favorite of the ranked modes. And they just kept piling on content, so rather than it being stretched out over a year, it felt like the entire summer of 2015 for Nintendo was just a big Splatoon event. And maybe that's not feasible if you're doing a live service game, but I honestly couldn't care about live service games and their feasibility anyway, so all I know is, as a one-off thing that they did, it really worked for Splatoon, and it made it exciting. It would have almost been just as exciting to have all that content at launch. But maybe then, maybe not. Maybe they just threaded the needle perfectly on having stuff just beyond your reach and then bringing it in just as you were starting to run out of stuff. I don't know, overall, they continued this model with Splatoon 2 and 3. It doesn't work, it's too stretched out, but Splatoon 1, probably just by pure accident, they had that formula down pat almost perfectly. And the game, I mean, it's got a lot of other things going on other than just being a competitive shooter. Uh, it's super unique as one of those where your traversal and your attack are interlinked with one another. And in addition to that, not only are you shooting with ink and moving with ink, you're also winning by putting down ink. So even if you weren't killing anybody, you were contributing in just the basic mode. So it was accessible to many people without being dumbed down. Super smart idea, essentially taking Nintendo's penchant for making platformers and putting it into a competitive shooter. And the single player here was also really, really good. As I guess it was unexpected and surprising that it was as fleshed out as it was. I mean, it's not incredible, but it worked when it needed to work, particularly by having really good bosses and then some really good one-off stages. Not incredible. And, well, they could probably make a better one in the future, though I haven't played Splatoon 3's campaign. But even so, it was a nice bit of value to this package. And with the online going down in 2024, I mean, the single player is all you're going to have, basically. The game used the Wii U gamepad in really great ways too, such as, well, one, the gyro, but also just having the map being the map on the bottom screen being live updated with where ink was being put down, and also where your friends and enemies were moving to on the map. And if you could tap, and if, pardon me, you tapped on the screen onto your friends, you could just jump to them. And it's not something that couldn't be done with just a pause menu like they did in later Splatoons, but it feels really good here. And also, while you were in lobbies, you could play squid jump while you were waiting. And sometimes you forgot, or at least I did, that I was waiting for a match to start. Phenomenal game all around, super creative, and the audiovisual experience on this game was marvelous, with great features besides that I haven't even talked on. So, after Splatoon, in August, just going to boot it up here. In August, we got another indie game, an indie exclusive that was, for my money, a really good tide over from one first-party game to the next. And that indie game was Runbow. Now, Runbow, let's just move stuff around. Runbow was, it wasn't necessarily double A, but it was pretty close. But it used the Wii U gamepad really well in some of its modes, and it also just was a really creative. It had a really creative concept for both its multiplayer and single player, and essentially the concept was, if you can see it, then it's there, and if you can't see it, then it's not there. And building on that, all the platforms, though there was some solid ones that never changed and were static, all the platforms that you jumped on, they would become invisible if the color which they were swept over the screen. And then as a new color bled onto the screen, or swept onto, however you want to put it, then that platform would become visible again, whereas a platform of the color uh, of the new color that just swept onto the screen would now be invisible as well. And so there's walls that became basically disappeared or reappeared depending on which color was showing up on the screen. And there was even a multiplayer mode where a player, the gamepad master, he could determine which color was being, how shall I put it, was being put on the screen. So if there was a bunch of purple platforms over a bottomless pit and the players were approaching them, then, you could change the color and at least put a pause to their advance, if not kill a few outright. And as a party game, I believe it had 9 players, a total of 9 players that you could do with a bizarre combination of controllers, even one of those controllers just being a nunchuck with the Wii remote being used by another player. Regardless of how they did it, it was a very, maybe not a very high production game, but it was very content rich with a very satisfying single player as well, and a really good DLC that added assets. And there was also other indie characters that guest starred aside from the Hughes, we'll call them. And 13 AM Games did a really great job on this game. It was basically a must own for this console. Well, maybe not a must own, but it was certainly good. And it was good up to the degree that a Nintendo game was expected to be good, at the very least. So, Runbow came out, and then after Runbow, in September 10th of 2015, or on September 10th, my goodness, I can't speak. We got another indie game that I hear is actually really, really good. Similar to Pikmin in that there's sort of a time limit, but in this one you're stealing things in a side-scroller action puzzle game, and that is The Swindle. I believe it came out on other systems as well, but I think it launched day and date with those systems on the Wii U. And it's a game I haven't played, but people have talked it up, and it looks really good and really conceptually interesting. And also one of the more higher budget indies as well. And I didn't talk about it, but I suppose Bit Trip Presents Runner 2 is also a really high-end indie that came out on the Wii U, and maybe could be included on this list as well. There are other indies here also, but, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk about them just yet. I don't know what their quality is, or if their quality, if I do know it, is up to that level to be on this list of choice Wii U games, I guess. But Runbow and Swindle, they do make that list, as does Affordable Space Adventures, especially Affordable Space Adventures. So, after The Swindle, just a day after, September 11th, 2015, we got a new sub-franchise on the Wii U in the form of Super Mario Maker. Now, this is a game that, well, yeah, basically it says it here. Anyone can make it, everyone can play it. And that's Super Mario Maker in a nutshell. I did not make too many courses personally, but I did play a lot of them, and this game is really, really awesome. It's one of the best uses of the gamepad, as you put down track assets with the stylus on the gamepad touchscreen, which was very user friendly. And I believe it came about as an idea because Nintendo had developed, what would be the word, developer software of their own to do such a thing, to make, maybe it was Super Mario Brothers U or something like that, or maybe Super Luigi U, but they had developed in-house technology for themselves, using the gamepad to put down level layouts. And they thought it would be a great game, and they were right. I'm not sure if this game remains the definitive Super Mario Maker experience, as 2 on the Switch allows you to create worlds, which is a super big deal, as basically you can make ideas bleed into each other and evolve over many levels rather than just packing them into one singular level. Or at least you can do that in a way that the player can experience in real time as you intend. Whereas this one, you're stuck with one level to make, or like one level for the player to play, and then they just move on to another level, either randomly selected or just going down the list of courses. Excuse me, I just had a sneeze. So, however I can explain it, basically, you could make multiple levels, but you couldn't string them together. Even so, though, this game remains the definitive experience for many people, as just the user interface was much better than the Switch's for making levels on account of the gamepad. And also, this game allowed you to use all of your amiibo characters, or almost all of them. And not only was it cool to have, say, a little Marth sprite or a little Zelda sprite on the screen, people then used those character sprites to they used that as like a greater thematic overture, I guess, to design levels, like to then design levels around those characters. Those characters, even though they were just sprites, they became inspirations for levels based off those characters. I'm sure there's a much simple way to describe that, but basically, yeah, I mean, people were making Metroid levels for the Metroid sprite and Zelda levels for the Zelda sprite. And some of that carried over in very limited fashion to the second game, particularly with Link, as I imagine the majority of Mario Maker levels themed around amiibos were themed around Zelda. But there's one level I remember, and a lot of people experienced these levels because the most popular ones were featured on the play screen, let's call it, or on the I wouldn't know how you would describe it, just basically the featured page. And this one level, anyway, was based off Captain Toad, because I believe you could play as Captain Toad, who wasn't an amiibo, but they put in an amiibo costume, even though there was no such amiibo. There was a Toad amiibo, but anyway. And so they made the level done in such a way where if you jumped at all, you failed the level. So in that way, you were playing essentially a Captain Toad game, because Captain Toad can't jump. And so you had to move through the level in like so manner. So yeah, that was a big deal game. Like, as was Splatoon. But anyway, after Super Mario Maker in October of 2015, we got Yoshi's Woolly World. This is a copy of the game I bought on launch day. I still have it. I've only played this game once, and this game is pretty decent. It's not necessarily great, but it's pretty good. The best way to play this game is to really invest into the notion that you're going to collect everything in each level. And if you do that, the game's going to be anywhere from 30 to 40 hours long, maybe even 50, which is quite a bit of a time sink. But if you don't want to do that, you can just play through each level, get to the end and move on to the next level without any fuss at all. Now, you do lose out on some of the special stages if you go about it that way, if you don't want to collect all the yarn balls in each stage. But the game doesn't make you collect the yarn. I don't know what you would call them. It's not a yarn ball. It's a it doesn't matter. I'm looking for what it's called. But the special yarns in each level. Anyway, you need to collect them to get everything in the levels, as well as some other things. But for myself, that was taking too long, so I just ran through the game, just completing the levels and nothing more. And the game becomes significantly less interesting if you do it that way, though still incredibly charming with some fun ideas. And the game was developed by, I don't know if it says it here. It was developed by Goodfield, the same people who did Kirby's Epic Yarn. But I would say I probably prefer Kirby's Epic Yarn over this game. Even so, it was still a quality title to supplement some of their bigger, grander titles like Mario Maker and Splatoon. Though I imagine this game, for all of its content and its very charming visuals, maybe some people consider this a must-own, which is entirely reasonable. So after Yoshi's Woolly World, in December, early December, we got Xenoblade Chronicles X. Now, I have played the first 30 hours of Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, and for 2 and 3, I haven't touched them. But this game, I actually, while I didn't play it to completion, I got stuck on the final boss, but I played it all the way through anyway. And there's no disc. I only own it digitally. But I always wanted the case for this game, because I guess it's kind of generic, but I like the scale shown here, and it's showing you the big feature of the game, which is about 40 hours in, you get to unlock these mechs called skells. And not only do they improve your combat capabilities, they improve your traversal as well. They travel really fast, and eventually you can unlock the power of flight. So I'm not a big fan of Xenoblade Chronicle games, but this game, not only is this a game I really enjoy in that series, this is one of my favorite open world games. And It's because they just did a really fantastic job of differentiating all the different environments, and in addition to there being extrinsic reward for exploring, mostly via finding probe sites and chaining them together, with each probe that you find next to the other, you chain them together, I guess, rather than finding one scattered from each other. And that way you made money to upgrade your weapons and eventually upgrade your mechs. And that was all done on the gamepad. And the gamepad features of this game are really, really fantastic too, because you're drawing links from one probe to the next in some cases, or just using it as a map is super vitally important because the world's so big. And there's other things you could do on the gamepad too. Nothing groundbreaking, but very well utilized in this game. But beyond that extrinsic reward, which I liked how simple that extrinsic reward was, there was a lot of intrinsic value in exploring, because this world, the things you would see in it, while they wouldn't have any function, just as a piece of landscape or as a object or a structure, they were just awe-inspiring. And this game was essentially the size of Breath of the Wild, probably even bigger. And these were the guys who developed the Breath of the Wild world. But they made it far more alien than Breath of the Wild, which is more naturalistic, and I guess they just had more fun with the landscapes. Here you can see a landscape here, which is kind of like a rock that's been weathered away, so now it kind of looks like, I don't know how you would call it, like a canopy, a rock canopy that's covering this this ground below it. And there's other stuff yet. And I don't know, there was something so majestic about the graphics in this game. I don't think there's a Switch game or even other Xenoblade games that look as good as this one. And maybe it's because they're more stylized, which is something I enjoy. But this game is a mixture of stylization and realism, I guess, in terms of aesthetic. And the music is really good too, except when it's not. Then it's completely awful in a very funny way. And is overall actually quite eclectic, but the music that's good is really good. So that's Xenoblade Chronicles X. Played it for 80 hours. And, I played these other games. Super Mario Maker 2 for 50, Splatoon for 100, and Xenoblade for 80. Only 3 really big games came out in 2015, but man, they were beefy and interesting. So I don't think I minded. But after Xenoblade Chronicles X, as I was saying, only about 3 games came out that were really worthwhile, with a total of 5 Nintendo games, including Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. But with those indie games I was talking about, it really was not a bad year, especially with this game coming out. And that is Fast Racing Neo, which is a sequel to a WiiWare game. It's developed by Shinen, and it's essentially it is a futuristic racer, a zero-gravity, fast-paced racing game, similar to Wipeout and F-Zero. And the game was only about 1 gig to download, and yet Shinen, being very competent technical developers, they made a game that was essentially almost AAA looking. And at the end of the day, it was more double A, I guess, but it was super impressive graphically. There was a few cut corners, and if you were standing still, the game didn't look super incredible, but you're not really supposed to be standing still in it. It had its own wrinkles, such as boosting polarities, where if you were going over an orange boost, you wanted to be using your orange engine, for lack of a better description. And if you were going over blue polarities, then you wanted to be switching over to blue. And there was orbs and stuff to collect too, to build up your boost meters and such, but it was essentially a very competent, modern looking F-Zero game. I'm not sure if it was as fast. And the only thing that really looked cheap to me in the game was your wipeouts. When you wiped out in the game, your vehicle model didn't take any visible damage or crumple or do anything cool with the physics of it. It just kind of stopped. It stopped maneuvering and kind of just went in a straight line and then slowly phased out. That was kind of the glitch in the system, I guess, with it appearing as a third party or a AAA experience. There we go. Otherwise, though, really impressive indie game that really supplemented the library of 2015. So even though there was only 5 first-party titles worth talking about in 2015, well, maybe 6 actually, but I'll talk about that one later. These 3 exclusive indie games, they were just a cut above maybe some of the typical indie games, and they really supplemented that first-party lineup for 2015, in my opinion, with some really smart use of the gamepad, particularly with Affordable Space Adventures, which that game is a must-have as a Wii U experience. But that was essentially 2015. So going into 2016, which the system was basically dead by this point, but there was still a couple games. And, well, this one I wouldn't really count as a new release, but for a remaster, it's actually really strong. And, well, you can see the title here, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD. This case is amazing. The case in general is very good, but particularly the cover art. I love it. There's something about re-release cover art that's just so much better than your initial release, and I think it has something to do with playing to demographics, but I'm not really going to talk about that. This to me is pretty much the best meat and potatoes Zelda game. Well, maybe not the best actually, but it's like the second or third best. Not the most unique, but it's quite good. Great dungeons, super large and exciting overworld to explore. Lots of really good set piece moments. And I talked about it in my Wii collection. And for this version, the big addition that they made, aside from some nice gamepad features, though those gamepad features I don't think were as needed as they were in Wind Waker HD, but they were still nice. But the big contribution that this version offered was all of the textures were reworked and redone to be more detailed. And since this game has a detailed art style, it makes it really good looking. They didn't touch up the geometry, nor did those textures have any kind of real bump mapping to make them appear appear not flat, I guess, but they still look really nice, and this is the definitive version of this game. It's based off the GameCube version of the game, as far as I know, the controls particularly. But the things that were added in the Wii version did carry over into this version, such as IR aiming, and even I believe you can play with the. Well, no, I don't think you can play with the Wii remote. But yeah, like gyro aiming, similar to IR aiming in the Wii version came over, and also widescreen support, of course. And yeah, this is the definitive way to play this game. It's got some good amiibo support with a dungeon, an optional dungeon where you play as just the wolf with the wolf amiibo, which I did own at one point. So that's really cool. And there was even amiibo support with the Zelda and Ganon amiibos. The Ganon one was super cool because you could use it to make the game more difficult, which was a very welcome addition. And used in addition with the hero mode, which already made the game more difficult. I think you took 4 times as much damage as you typically did, and there was no hearts around, which is a really good way to play that game. Still doesn't make the game actually a challenge, but maybe it gives a little more bite. So I don't know if I'd really include this as like a new game for the Wii U, whereas Wind Waker, I definitely would, as the experience is very different, but the graphics are really, really nice, certainly. So after Twilight Princess came out in March, still in March, we got, well, we didn't get this game. This game came out in April. We got Pokken Tournament. Which I have in a generic Xbox 360 case. And, well, this is definitely one of those more AA releases. It only has about 16 characters and not too many modes, and the single player is kind of just a multiplayer mode fluffed out with some arbitrary objectives. But I was playing this with my nephews, and it's pretty cool. One of the cool things about it is you have 2 different modes of play. You have the over-the-shoulder mode of play when you're initiating combat. And then you have the side-on view when you have successfully initiated combat. And this is a fighting game by Namco. I believe it was done by the Tekken team, hence why its name is Pokken. And honestly, I think I'd rather play a fighting game about Pokemon than a real Pokemon game, because each of the Pokemon, they have a lot of cool moves and projectile attacks and combos they can do. The controls are a bit simple, but the character models look good, and the selection of Pokemon, while small, is all around solid. I don't know if I should applaud them or criticize them for making one of those Pokemon's Chandelure, but what can you do? You know, it wasn't a huge game, and it may have even only come out for $40 or so, but yeah, I'll definitely play more of it later, because it was a very fun local party game. And the cool thing about it actually was that because you had the two separate screens, you could play each player and two-player could have their character be over the shoulder without having the screen split in some very odd way, or having one character be massively disadvantaged. If you think about a game like Mario Tennis, where being in the far court is not good if you're just sharing one screen rather than having it be split. Like in Mario Tennis or Wii Sports. In this game, it would have been the equivalent of that, but because of the Wii U gamepad, and I didn't even think about that, they didn't have to split the screen or disadvantage one of the players, which is a interesting wrinkle with the Wii U gamepad. Not that it's a huge deal in the long run, but a nice use of its dual screen nature. So, speaking of dual screens, after Pokken Tournament, we got Star Fox Zero, which came out in April of 2016. This game, I really enjoy this game, but I'm not going to tell you it's a great game. I'm not even going to say it's a good game, but it is a game I very much enjoyed. And the reason I enjoyed it is for the reason that people hated it, and that was the controls. And the controls in this game, they're funny because not only is the aiming decoupled from the flying, you also have an increased field of view on the second screen of the gamepad. If you just move it around, you can see 90 degrees either side of you or 90 degrees above and below you. And that's pretty cool, but that meant that a lot of people found that they were looking at the bottom screen and and while they were looking around, they weren't focused on where their ship was going. I can understand how that might happen initially, but I don't know. I find it all a bit silly. I like the controls, and the game is very, very fun to play as a Star Fox game, an on-rail shooter, an on-rail shooting Star Fox game with some all-range mode sections as well, which actually there's an increase of those, probably because of the increase in field of view. But here's the thing with the controls. If you're in the cockpit view, like whether that be looking through the gamepad screen or just having it thrown onto the main screen, which you can do with the minus button, it's entirely possible for you to fly your R-Wing in that view. Just as it is entirely possible to be shooting while you're in the traditional Star Fox behind the ship view. Like, completely plausible to be shooting without looking down at the gamepad. You can kind of just use a trace around method to shoot stuff down, and you can just be moving the gyro controls in your hand, and you don't need to be waving them around like I've seen some people. You just kind of move them gently, and you just move them side to side or up and down, and if something's coming past your nose, you can kind of just tilt the gamepad in that direction, not even looking, and shoot some shots down there, and you'll probably get it. It's entirely possible. Though, again, I will give some people some benefit of the doubt, because every time I pick this game up, I'm always changing how I play it ever so subtly. With the first 40 hours of it, I was looking at the gamepad screen more than I was at the top screen. And then the second time, I was pretty much never looking at the gamepad screen and just kind of lazily aiming around with the tracer round method. And then the third time, I was still kind of looking up at the top screen, but then I started wanting to lock my reticle so that it would only move around when I was firing. But then that created problems because it meant that I had to have initiated fire to place my reticle on an enemy ship to use a smart bomb rather than just kind of, gently tilting my reticle up in that general direction and using a smart bomb, which feels much better. So I had to be like using my middle finger to hold down the trigger and just kind of spraying shots, and then with my index finger using the smart bomb, which felt kind of clumsy. So the controls are a bit odd, as even I'm not sure how I'm going to be using them. The main problem with this game, though, is that they didn't put enough money into it. And it feels very, very budget. Sometimes it looks really good despite that, with very strong primary colors, almost inspired by Star Fox on the SNES. But when it looks like it's emulating the N64 game more, it doesn't look as good, and the texture work's just not where it needs to be, and there could be more objects and geometry on screen and just more dynamicism within the areas that you're in. They feel kind of empty and incomplete. Like even when compared to something like Star Fox Assault, which feels much more dynamic in that regard. So I really enjoy this game. I think it's worth owning on the system, but only to a degree. For many people, it was basically the last straw with the Wii U for them. Which, that's fine. And they thought it was like a proof that dual screen gaming on a console was never a good idea. Which, I don't know if I feel that way, but you could definitely make a Star Fox game with similar controls just with the Wii remote, should they have decided to. And after Star Fox Zero, which also came out with a game called Star Fox Guard, but I've never opened that game or played it. After Star Fox Zero came out in June 2016, we got Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which I haven't played yet, but it's a game developed by Atlas. I think it's developed by Atlas. I can't see it. And it's a crossover, though, between essentially Persona and Fire Emblem, though the Persona characters and the Fire Emblem characters don't look like what you would think they look like. And instead, like, the game is sort of its own vibe rather than a fusion between those two, though it features elements of those two. And it's kind of a pop idol game, part dungeon crawler RPG, part social RPG, I guess. After all, it's sort of based off Persona. I have not played it, so I could just be making all that up, but that's my understanding of it. It has a very nice art style. I think it uses the Wii U gamepad in some fun, silly ways, like it counters as like a cell phone in your hands when someone's calling you, which is a cute idea. And the game has very soft, bright colors, maybe a little too polygonally simple. but maybe that's just part of the art style. People really like Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. It's its own crazy game, and it's like one of two RPGs on the Wii U, and both of them were very good. Now, that is all of my physical games for the Wii U. And, I actually have quite a few. But the last game I bought on the Wii U, I intended to buy it for the Switch, and I eventually did, but I bought it on the Wii U first, and that's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, this game, not my favorite Zelda game, but I can certainly respect it. It was a nice breath of fresh air for the franchise. And it, I don't know. I don't know if I have much more to say about it than that. A lot of new cool ideas, particularly the chemistry engine and the open world was exciting to explore. If only because it was, well, never mind about that. I don't even know what thought I was going to have. And the only thing that bothers me about this version is clearly there was Wii U functionality, like for the gamepad here, that they obviously ripped out of this version because they didn't want to have the version of this game on their old failure of a system having advantages over their new hot fancy system, which business-wise that makes sense. Even so, though, I can tell with the user interface and some of the Divine Beast maps, and even possibly even the Sheikah Slate items, and even the way that you can put down beacons on the map, all of that would have been really fancy and useful on this touchscreen. So, still uses the gyro and the buttons, and it's a perfectly acceptable version of this game, if a little more unoptimized, though I think they may have optimized it since I played it. Still, though, there exists a version of this game with all the Wii U gamepad features that would be my favorite way of playing it, had I gotten my hands on it. Even so, while it was delayed, had a delayed homecoming, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was the Wii U's Zelda game developed for it, and it closed the book on the Wii U on a good final note, on a strong final chapter. And then I guess Darksiders War Mastered Edition came out around that time or just before, which is a cool version of that game. Yeah, that is all I really have to show for my Wii U. Let's see if I can stack these without making a mess, and then I'll show them off. So I'm, overall very happy with the software output of the Wii U, especially when you consider the fact that it existed alongside the 3DS. So, taken together, those two had about 150 games between them, and that's no small amount of games. And frankly, I may prefer the Wii U over the 3DS. There are some games that are on the Wii U that I never picked up that may have been good or were good, but I just didn't have a particular interest in them. There was Paper Mario Color Splash, which was heavily criticized at the time, but it's probably a decent game, all things said and done. Very beautiful looking. There was Art Academy, which is actually a really exciting game because it was essentially built with the Miiverse in mind, and I haven't talked about Miiverse, which is down here. If I click on it, nothing happens because it's shut down. But Art Academy, it wanted you to use the stylus to draw, and it taught you how to draw. And you would then show off your drawings on Miiverse. And, if there was an Art Academy page for Miiverse, which there certainly was, which was one of the cool things about Miiverse, you would follow game channels that you owned, or you would follow the channels of the games that you owned. I apologize. I used to be able to talk much better. And so the Art Academy channel would just be marvelous. And even beyond that, you could just be drawing Mario and show it on the Mario page. And it had lessons and, given the nice big screen to learn how to draw and how it had the stylus, Art Academy sounds like a phenomenal time. There is one on the 3DS, but I don't know. I don't know if it would work as well. The screen's not as big, and I don't know. It could be good, but the production value on the Wii U one was stronger, and just like the artificial world that you were in, where you were painting, was really nice looking, and the gallery that you could put your paintings in. Fantastic application for this system. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a drawer, but there's a fantastic use of the Wii U gamepad right there. And of course, there was also 2 Assassin's Creed games. There was Watch Dogs, which wasn't a terribly good game anyway, and it came out a year after, so doesn't seem very important. But yeah, you had 2 Assassin's Creed games. Black Flag, which I almost picked up, is a very good Assassin's Creed game overall. There was Injustice, Gods Among Us, and there was Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater, which was a very good horror game. So I've been told. Not that I have any use for that myself. And, well, if we just look at through the indies too, the indie scene on the Wii U was much stronger than it was on the Wii. So you had games, some of which were exclusive, some of which weren't. Knit Underground, I believe, was exclusive. Super promising looking. It's like a neon-colored Metroidvania. Guacamelee Super Turbo Edition, supposed to be very good. Trine, the Trine games. I had a lot of fun with these with my nephews. Little Inferno is supposed to be great. I think anything Tomorrow Corporation does is a winner. The people who did World of Goo. You had Severed, which was a Vita game that you did sword fighting with the touchscreen and with the Wii U gamepad and the 3DS as well. Perfect fit for that game. In fact, maybe even a better fit with a stylus over your fingers. Yeah, The Swindle, Mighty Switch Force. I didn't know I had DuckTales remastered. Mighty Switch Force Hyperdrive Edition. I think this was an exclusive on the Wii U. It wasn't my kind of platformer, but people loved it. Scram Kitty and his buddy on rails. Super cool idea where you're like this pod that is on rails, and you can jump from one rail to the next. And the way you jump is you just get pulled in by a gravitational pull. And that's pretty cool. Gunman Clive's pretty cool. It'll Do is a Zelda game. A Human Resource Machine. I'm going through all of them. Yeah, so there was a lot of indies, and the Swapper was really good puzzle platformer. Axiom Verge, everyone loves that game. I don't necessarily, but it's on here, and and even just beyond, indie games. I've already showed it off, but just I got my Wii games, and then I got a few of my Wii or my Wii U games, and then I got a few of my Wii games with the rest of them physical, and then I got DS games, and then a pile of GBA games, and a pile of N64 games, and then a pile of SNES games, and then, well, not a pile, but a fair amount of NES games, which I could have bought them here, but I bought them on the 3DS. And then indie games. Like, I don't know. I just find that the things that you could purchase on the Wii U were really plentiful overall, even though you maybe purchased them on the Wii. And the controller, super comfortable, and you had a lot of good controller options. And just beyond that, like, the Wii had a great amount of personality with things like Miiverse and a very beautiful eShop user interface. And these videos are all just supposed to be positive, but I was always very disappointed in the Switch for getting rid of these personal wrinkles that were found on the Wii U and on the 3DS as well in this generation of Nintendo hardware. Excuse me. All of those things which are gone now, particularly Miiverse and the eShop. But even without them, I don't know, I might still recommend buying a Wii U now. For one, it's ridiculously cheap. You can get a Wii U, or my brother got a Wii U at my suggestion, and now I have that Wii U. But anyway, he got that Wii U for $100, and it came with Super Mario 3D World, Wind Waker HD, and a extra Pro controller for $100 Canadian. He then sold that Wii U to me for $65 since, well, he didn't need a fourth Wii U. And I figured I could use a second Wii U because in case my first one goes down, I can I can safeguard all these games that I have. And, yeah, I mean, the common refrain or reframe, no, it's refrain. The common refrain in the Wii U days was that the system had no games, but I count, for myself anyway, for the games that I considered worth buying and worth owning, the strong ones, 54 games. And I don't know, I can be happy with 54 games very, very easily. And especially when those games were all winners. Every time I played a game on the Wii U, it was a winner. Nintendo Land, a winner. This game, well, probably a winner if I give it a chance. Nintendo Land, a winner. Pikmin 3, a winner. Rayman Legends, a winner. Wonderful 101, a winner. Wind Waker HD, a winner. Arkham Origins, it's a winner. I haven't played any of these games. Super Mario 3D World, a winner. NES Remix Pack, a winner. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, a winner. Xenoblade Up Here, a winner. Super Mario Maker Splatoon, winners. Even Star Fox Zero, like, I had a lot of fun with, despite the fact that it's not terribly, truly good. But yeah, I don't know. It even indie games on this system, which I don't love indie games so much. I mean, I have like 60 on the Switch, so I do like them. These particular ones, like Affordable Space Adventures, they just were they were just killer. And Shovel Knight's it's one of those indie games that, yeah, I consider it. It's up here, like a AAA experience, basically. So I don't know. It had enough games for me, and between the 3DS and the Wii U, I think Nintendo had enough games for everybody. It surprises me that people just put off buying one because it didn't have that killer app for them, which they just kind of put on a higher and higher pedestal, rather than, I don't know, just the accumulation of great games. And even at the end of the day, though, the Wii U did have games that should have been garnered as killer apps. But that doesn't matter. I don't really care. I mean, for somebody who doesn't care, I'm talking about it. But popularity is basically nothing. Just like with the GameCube. If the GameCube couldn't be popular among Nintendo fans or people who buy Nintendo consoles, then, well, there's really no correlation between quality and popularity. And this system, just for these games, even though all the other features are gone, I would definitely recommend picking up a Wii U. Even today, you can get those games on the Switch, though you'll be paying at least $40 secondhand for some of them. Games like Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze up here. But if you want to buy it on the Wii U, not only do you get a better case, you also get it for maybe $10 US. For me, I could buy it $15 US. Call of Duty Ghosts I got for $20. Mario Kart 8 I got for $10. Same with 3D World. Overall, with a new Wii U, and let's say all of these games that I own physically, I maybe got that for $550 Canadian, which is basically the asking price of a new console, so it's pretty good. And considering that Nintendo consoles particularly haven't really graphically jumped higher than the Wii U grade, I don't know. A Wii U, I'd recommend picking one up. Just a super cheap library, and just the physical product, I think, is actually really beautiful. But I guess you have to like the blue color. Anyway, before we go, because I don't know where to fit this in, I'm just going to show off some of my Switch games, which I own about 22 of them, or owned 20 of them. I gave some of them away. So first off, I have Triangle Strategy, which looks very promising. I think this is the Japanese version, but luckily the Switch is region-free. No More Heroes 3, which has great cover art, though I really don't like these generic red spines and these little cases. They're nice and tactile, but they're just so small and they have nothing in them, so there's no weight. But either way. And then we have Metroid Dread. Haven't played, but it's probably one of the strongest games on the Switch. Luigi's Mansion 3. Haven't played it, but its presentation's super great. Tactics Ogre Reborn, which is just a SNES remake or a PS1 remake of a SNES game. and not even really a remake, a remaster, which is super cool because it never came out in the West for Nintendo fans. Collection of Mana, similar thing to Tactics Ogre. You have a game that never came out in the West, which is super cool. And then you have a remake, Link's Awakening, which, well, yeah, I mean, it's very nice. Link's Awakening is an incredible game on the Game Boy Color, so not necessarily the craziest fan of this art style, but I applaud its uniqueness, and it's Link's Awakening, so should be a good time. So I really haven't done much collecting for the Switch, with a lot of games being owned digitally. So yeah, that's just some Switch games, and that will do it for this Wii U game show and tell. And it may even be the last show and tell I do. I have some SNES games and N64 games I could be showing off. I don't have any of the boxes, and I have some GBA cartridges I could run my hands through. But otherwise, those are all of my major collections, with the Wii U being the smallest, but probably my favorite collection, if maybe not the GameCube. I really like the GameCube collection I have, and I really need to play all of these games. But yeah, we'll probably get going here. But before we do, I'll just show off the stack before we sign off. So, thank you for watching.